a man, who they say he murdered 3. Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Do aliens drink coffee? They must if Organic Man Coffee Coffee is the best in the universe. If they didn't drink coffee, it would only be the best on the world, or the earth. If you want to drink only the best coffee, swing by Organic Man Coffee Trike, 4501 McPherson. The coffee beans, which are actually cherries, are roasted right there in the back room that is actually to the left of the counter. That's life. Things are called by the wrong name all the time. For example, public servant, which amounts to treat somebody like royalty and make them rich. There are only so many days in our lives, and drinking bad coffee makes them badder. If you're not in Laredo and still want the best coffee, go to organicmancoffeetrike.shop. One of my listeners asked if I had ever done a show about Project Serpo. I said no, but I was going to. I can't remember who asked. So if it was you, let me know. I should have written it down, but I forgot to write it down, and so therefore I forgot who asked. A lot of my research for shows involves way too many websites that mostly say the exact same thing. The old cut and paste. You would think the folks putting out websites on any subject would do a little work to make the information their own. I've seen the same mistakes in spelling and grammar reprinted over and over as the creators of these pages act as if they have discovered something new when all they're actually doing is taking information from somebody else. I'm a little paranoid about using my Art Bell coffee cup. I'm afraid either me or one of the cats is going to break it. I might have to go back to using my steel cup. If I drop it, nothing happens. It just makes a weird noise. While looking into Serpo, I found a whole new problem. Websites with completely different information that you would think involved different subjects. The number of bodies, the way the beings looked, the way they interacted with humans, on and on. It was almost as if there were several different stories all going by the same name. I've said this before and I will say it again. I have no contacts feeding me secret information or documents. I am not any good at hacking. I know how to turn my computer on and who to run to when things go south. There's no reason for the FBI, NSA, CIA, or any other alphabet agency to pay me a visit. Everything I'm telling you is found on the websites or in my massive book collection. I do theorize from time to time based on how some information sounds or who's putting it out. I usually say it's just my ideas, but sometimes I forget that too. Back in 2005, an anonymous source sent a bunch of emails to a UFO discussion group headed by a former U.S. government official, Victor Martinez. The messages involved a top secret space program where United States astronauts were taken to a planet called Serpo in the Zeta Reticuli Star System. Zeta Reticuli are two stars located in the southern constellation of the Reticulum. Try not to think about a particular part of your anatomy. It refers to a network or any reticulated system or structure. The star system is composed of two sun-like stars, Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 Reticuli, located at a distance of about 39 light years from Earth. Aliens called Ebens from this planet lived here on Earth. The project was named for the planet in orbit around both of these stars. The person sending out these emails called themselves anonymous. He or she said they were a retired government worker who had direct involvement with this project. When the crash at Roswell took place, it involved two and sometimes three spacecraft, depending on who you're reading. In the years after the UFO crash just outside of Cape Girardeau, Missouri, in the spring of 1941, the government was ready and waiting for the next one. A military unit had been established and plans made in case there was a second crash. In 1947, the unit had its chance to spring into action and see to it no outside civilian involvement occurred. At Cape Girardeau, too many civilians were on hand, and this would not do at all that alien technology was to be secreted away. At Roswell, orders were sent to establish a perimeter, keep the area secure, collect any and all debris, and convince any witnesses to keep their mouths shut or else. At the crash site, a bunch of alien bodies were found. There was also one living being found, and it was taken into custody. I've seen that joke video showing a gray being questioned by unseen military officials, and suddenly the being begins to choke or something. The medics rush in and begin working on it, always being sure to keep the creature in the middle of the screen and in focus. The medics are working over this creature's shoulders, as if that's how you do things. Yeah, that's not how it's done. Shame on the mess. Yes, I watch bonehead truckers. Real truck drivers don't wear flip flops. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's another channel that shows all the bad things that some truck drivers have been doing, like wearing flip flops. Stories are out there on what exactly took place in 1947. Way too many folks trying to sell their books while coming up with bizarre stories of Japanese prisoners of war, or maybe they were parachute dummies. Anything to try to explain away the crash and at the same time sell their books. I said I had theories about things like this. How do you make a story disappear? Once it's out there, it's nearly impossible to erase. To make it go away, you flood the place with stories that muddy the water until the real story becomes lost in a tremendous pile of lies. The problem with the murder of JFK isn't the lack of evidence. There is way too much pointing in every direction except towards the truth. To make Roswell go away, the government created hundreds of alternative stories. Plus, they made fun of anybody trying to tell the truth until anybody with a real account was afraid of the ridicule to say anything. Now, let's get back to the crash. One alien survived and was transferred to Los Alamos National Laboratory. Los Alamos had been established in 1943 as Project Y, a top secret site for designing nuclear weapons under the Manhattan Project during World War II. After the war, it continued as a secure location. The other 3 to 6 deceased aliens, once again, depending on which story you read, were placed in a freezer at the same lab. Others say the bodies, as well as the survivor, were taken to Wright-Patterson in Ohio. The survivor was either a gray or it looked almost human, depending. This being spoke English and had a translator, or it had a translator, which allowed the military to question it about the sources, about the saucer, and the equipment found scattered about both sites. One item of interest was the communication device that, when used, allowed the humans to communicate with the alien as well as contacting the being's home planet called Serpo. I have read those annoying articles questioning why any creature from another distant star system would speak English. UFOs have been reported for as far back as recorded time. Anyone visiting our planet for thousands of years would learn the language from all over, so they would be able to watch TV and listen to podcasts. Or, no, they would know what the heck is going on down here on the planet, not just English, but every language. After establishing contact with the scientists and the military personnel, the survivor gave them the location of his home planet, and he continued to cooperate until its death in 1952. There's no report on what became of the body. It probably wound up on a dissecting table and got chopped up into hundreds of little tiny pieces. The beings on Serpo must not have wanted its return, or the idea just never came up. Not since Aurora has there been a report of an alien funeral. The whole idea on what to do with the dead is very convoluted, depending on your culture. Bodies can be cremated, buried, preserved, mummified, cut up and kept on ice, or left out in the open for the vultures to come get it, or maybe kept in the back room until the right time. Our concept of how to deal with the dead might not be a thing on some other planet. The boys in the white lab coats continued communicating with the Ebens. I'll bet it wasn't all scientific ideas being passed back and forth. The mind boggles trying to think about it because when dealing with an alien life form, what would you say? How's the weather on Serpo? Yeah. Knowing some scientists, I'll bet there were a few inappropriate discussions. Some of those folks are a little weird. With time, somebody wanted to meet face to face with more of these Ebens. Nothing bad had come from having the survivor living alongside the folks exposed to it. I'll bet one of y'all just said, yeah, but what about the extraterrestrial exposure law that came out in 1969? NASA was granted sole responsibility and authority to guard the Earth against any harmful contamination resulting from personnel, spacecraft, or other property returning to the Earth after landing on or coming within the atmospheric envelope of a celestial body. If there were already people in close contact with aliens, why bother? It's the old left hand not knowing what the right is doing. If NASA said there was no need to quarantine the astronauts, people would ask, well, how do you know? Which would lead to some other questions the folks in charge didn't want to have to avoid. Once you start telling a lie, it will grow until either it becomes so big it takes over your life or you're found out. I'm not sure who decided it was time, but somebody said, let's meet up. 6 years after the survivor was no longer surviving. April 1964, an alien spacecraft landed near Alamogordo, New Mexico. The beings stepped out from it were either grays or human looking, once again, depending on who wrote the article. The report says the aliens retrieved the bodies of their dead comrades. I wonder if this was just added to pretend that we don't have aliens on ice somewhere. If the government had bodies, somebody's going to say, hey, let's see them. Somebody in power, like those folks in Congress. Oh, come to think of it, I think they've already asked that. And of course, they were told to pound sand. In 1974, Richard Nixon was playing golf with his close friend Jackie Gleason when he said, you want to see something really scary? No, that was from the Twilight Zone movie, 1983. Nixon asked if Gleason wanted to see some alien bodies. Jackie Gleason was fascinated by UFOs and he said yes. Nixon drove him out to Homestead Air Force Base where there were aliens on ice. This must have been bodies from some other race, some other crash site, or the story of the bodies being handed back to the Ebens was just that, a story. It makes me wonder how many crash sites there have been, and how many alien bodies have been recovered and then hidden away in a lab somewhere, all over the planet. I did a little search just to see how many I could find, and I lost track sometime in the 1980s. Let's just say those UFOs must have some really high premiums with Geico. Once more, some people ask, how come all those UFOs keep crashing after being able to travel millions of miles through space? Have you ever seen an aircraft carrier crash? I've been to a few plane crashes. Small planes seem to crash all the time. Big fancy jets with all kinds of high tech make dirt landings all the time. Some make huge messes, while others manage to stay relatively intact. The more flying saucers we have in the sky, the more likely one or two are going to get planted. Back at Alamogordo, the aliens exchanged some technology with us, and we must have given them something of value. Maybe we gave them a few recipes on how to prepare mutilated cow meat. The article about this exchange said the aliens were using some form of a translator. It didn't say whether this was one of their crew or some kind of a machine. Like I said, if they had been coming to the planet for thousands of years, they should have learned the language. That is, unless they couldn't speak like humans. There's those folks that say they communicate telepathically. There I go, trying to make up words again. Need more coffee. The exchange was successful because we didn't all die from any kind of an alien disease. The aliens must not have died either. It was decided to exchange some people in 1965. A group of volunteers from the US, probably all military, went back to Serpo, and a bunch of aliens stayed here on Earth. Some say there was only one Eben that stayed here, and others say there were several. One account says 12 people went on a 10-year mission. 4 years before Neil Armstrong said, "One small step for man," 12 people were walking around on some distant planet. 10 men and 2 women, with all kinds of skills in a variety of subjects, went to study aliens and see what might benefit all of us. Uh, all of us being the military and the elites that think they own the planet and folks with lots of money. So far, I don't think anybody else on the earth has benefited from any of this information they gathered. The journey to Serpo, which is 37 light years from Earth, took 9 months aboard the alien ship. Serpo was similar to our planet, but a bit smaller. It orbited a double star system and had an atmosphere similar to that of Earth. According to the report, Serpo was very much like Earth. It was inhabited by beings similar enough to us to be able to walk around without attracting attention. Having 2 suns meant that the radiation levels were higher, and the humans had to resort to protection of some type. SPF 5000 and an umbrella or two. 2 of the men died from complications. They went to a party that said the wrong thing to the wrong alien. Or maybe they decided to sunbathe and they were burnt to a crisp. They tried drinking some local firewater. I couldn't find any details on how they died or what became of their bodies. The heat was extreme and it took the remaining humans several years to adopt. I just had this thought pop into my head. Maybe the Ebens took those 2 humans and chopped them up into little pieces, and now they keep them on ice, kind of like we do with them. Don't know. Wasn't in any of the reports I read. The crew took enough food to last 2.5 years, but in the end, they had to resort to Eben's local cuisine. Maybe that's what killed those 2 guys. I've eaten some exotic things in my time. I managed to eat army chow without dying. MREs did give me some issues, but everything came out in the end. I hope those guys took enough coffee to last the entire trip. Or maybe the Ebens have their own kind of coffee. At some point, the humans had to indulge in a gastrointestinal game of Russian roulette. Will this kill me? Or will it make me explode on the commode? Food poisoning is no laughing matter unless you're not the one experiencing it. The humans did manage to eat the local food and not die. Days on Serpo were 43 hours long. There was no report on how the locals worked this out. In the late 18th century, companies started to maximize the output of their factories, running them 24/7. To make things more efficient, people had to work more hours. The average workday was 10 to 16 hours long. That was considered normal. Well, that was considered normal by the folks in charge. The workers began to suffer from exhaustion, and this led to a lot of accidents. Seeing as the day was 24 hours long, it was decided to divide it into 3 parts: work, relaxation, and sleep. A 43-hour day divided 3 equal parts would still be way too many hours for a human. There's no report of whether the Ebens ran an 8-hour day or whether they worked a third of the day. It never came up. Having 2 suns, it never got totally dark. At night, the smaller sun was still visible in the sky. Kind of like the Northern Territories in Canada, only lacking that really long, dark winter. They tell us the humans were allowed total freedom to explore Serpo. Whether they had lots of cameras or how much film they took is never mentioned in any of the articles I read. How many pictures can you take in 10 years? Did they have developing equipment along? Film can last up to 40 years if it's kept cool, which on Serpo, well, that might have been a real problem. Edwin Land, the inventor of the Model 95 land camera, this was the first commercial instant camera, which came out in 1948. The film packs had to be kept cool and dry, and they would have been a lot more bulky than rolled film. Let's just say they had cameras and they took some photos. The geology of the alien world was a bit different. There were few mountains and no oceans. There were a few species of plants, but mostly near the polar regions where it was a bit cooler. There were animal species, and some of these were larger than you would expect, but the Ebens didn't eat them. Instead, they used them as transportation and sometimes to help do work. Think of Fred Flintstone sitting on the back of that brontosaurus just before he yells yabba dabba doo. The way the planet sounds to me, most of the living would have been done underground, where the radiation would have been less and the temperature would have been more acceptable. There have been a lot of alien researchers saying that most alien civilizations have their buildings underground. Even Valiant Thor said the Venetians lived underground. The people of Serpo lived in small communities located inside larger cities. They had no central government, but they seemed to get along just fine without one. I think we would all get along fine without one. I see a good idea here. Just think, no politicians. This is probably why the whole project was kept secret. The people of Serpo lived in I already said that. The Ebens had a form of leadership, but they also had an army, but the Earth team said that they didn't have any weapons. Violence was almost unheard of. They had no concept of money or trade. Each Eben was given items according to their needs. Reading this, I see a slant towards socialism, as if the person writing the article was trying to push an agenda. I might be wrong about this, but how many times in the past did contactees say the Earth needed to stop making nuclear weapons or the aliens were going to intercede? We didn't, and neither did they. Reading this and thinking about it, maybe the aliens knew our nuclear weapons were powerful enough to stop their plans of world domination. So instead, they just paid off a bunch of politicians and they wound up taking over anyway. As for the socialism aspect, living among the Ebens for 13 years, maybe the military folks were brainwashed or enticed into seeing things different from our way of doing things. Or perhaps the person who leaked the information just made a few strategic changes. The planet had a population of about 650,000. The human crew noted that the Ebens were disciplined in all aspects of their lives, working on a schedule based on the movement of their suns. There were no other civilizations on Serpo other than the Ebens. Their method of reproduction was similar to ours, but had a much lower success rate. They don't say how they know this. I hate to think. No pictures were allowed of children, although there were lots of kids around. Well, not lots, but there were kids around. The Ebens just wouldn't let the humans take any pictures of them. This makes me wonder what might have been found had they taken any photos. Or could this have been some kind of a cultural thing? Some people consider photography a way to steal the souls or their essence, purity of essence, as General Jack Ripper used to say from the movie Doctor Strangelove. Peace on earth, purity of essence, POE. That was the secret code word. Upon returning to Earth, the remaining 8 members of the expedition were quarantined for a year. Oh, somehow I forgot to mention that 2 of the people, one man and one woman, had decided to stay on Serpo. They didn't want to come back to Earth for whatever reason. Maybe they discovered they really liked the food. Maybe they liked that heat, that never-ending sunlight. That doesn't say, just that of the original crew of 12, only 8 of them returned. During this period after the return, they were interrogated, and the full report amounted to 3,000 pages. Having lived on a smaller planet, their bodies would have become used to a lower gravity as well. This would lead to some health problems. And don't forget about all that alien food. Their digestive tracts had to readjust to human food once more. Hmm. The returning astronauts were placed in some super secret location, either Area 51 or Wright-Patterson. Maybe one of the deep underground military facilities for quarantine, observation, questioning, and to readjust to Earth. They spent about a year under the supervision of doctors and scientists, undergoing the examination and compiling travel reports. You know, somebody collected all of their number twos so they could study how alien food worked through the human digestion. That's a job I'd really not want. A year later, they received new identities, documents. They got paid a pile of money, and they were given new lives wherever they wanted to live. None of them lived very long. By 2002, all participants in the trip to Serpo were dead. The cause of death could have been all that radiation received during the flight, as well as while living on the planet. It could have been some unknown microbe that had gotten in them through food, water, or just being there. It could have been their bodies got so adjusted to being on a smaller planet with less gravity that the return to Earth was just too hard on them. The descriptions of the aliens said they looked just like us and they spoke English. This was also mentioned by Betty and Barney Hill after their close encounter of the worst kind back in 1961. The inhabitants of Zeta Reticuli System are humanoids, if not human. Betty actually had a conversation with who she thought was the leader of the aliens. He showed her a map of their star system that until recently was just a bunch of dots. Now we know it was actually accurate. Barney said these beings and the spacecraft looked human. The aliens spoke English to the hills, but amongst themselves they had a different language that neither of them could understand. Bob Lazar said that during his work in Area 51, he managed to see aliens from the planet Serpo and their spacecraft, several times. Travis Walton awoke to find he was surrounded by gray creatures who he decided he was going to fight. Travis is a big guy. I met him and he's substantial. He was I don't want to say lumberjack. He cut down trees for a living, so you don't get that in small folks. To calm him down, a human-looking alien came to the rescue. Travis thought this guy was from Earth, uh, there to save him, not knowing that he was just one of the aliens. Valiant Thor was an extraterrestrial being who resided and provided counsel at the Pentagon for a period of 3 years back in the 50s. He held meetings with President Eisenhower and Vice President Richard Nixon, during which he conveyed warning messages. Photographs of him show what looks like any human you might see in or around town. But he was from Venus and not Serpo. According to one of the anonymous sources, the official space program of Earthlings to Serpo was just a cover. Based on alien technology, a fleet of 8 motherships and 43 smaller defense ships was being created. The colony on Mars was also founded by Americans together with the Soviet Union in 1964. The source claims that Earthlings have already visited all the planets of our solar system, with the exception of Mercury. This would make the entire Cold War a non happening, except for the billions of dollars and thousands of lives lost. The elites might have used the Cold War to steal the money. As for the war, just remember how in 1984 they always had a war going on with somebody. The reports say the Ebens haven't contacted us humans since 1984. Talk about a coincidence. We have only the reports said that have been snuck out of top secret files to believe or disbelieve any of this. How much of it was true and how much of it was made up by somebody wanting to sell a book. Everything involving the project was and still is considered top secret. Once something is classified, it takes an act of God, since Congress never does anything good, to unclassify it. Any FOIA requests are ignored by saying, this never happened and we were never there. In 1983, a man named Richard Doty, who identified himself as a United States Air Force sergeant, claimed that he had been providing records of this exchange program to journalist Linda Moulton for her HBO documentary, The E.T. Factor. Richard Doty is one of the more controversial figures in the history of UFO studies. Doty had a 20-year career with the Air Force, including years as a special agent for the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. During that time, he was assigned to conduct surveillance on a scientist, Paul Benowitz, who had inadvertently acquired information about a classified Air Force program. Doty admitted he fed disinformation to Benowitz and to other UFO researchers. He forged documents and he muddied the waters. Benowitz wound up killing himself as a result of all of this shenanigans. Doty has never said that he felt bad about this because he was just doing his job. The Air Force Office of Special Investigations spread disinformation amongst UFO cases and sent operatives to UFO conferences and conventions to gather intel. In essence, they were spying on U.S. citizens who had never been accused of any crimes other than thinking that UFOs might be real. Doty was involved in a raid on Bob Lazar's home and office while serving as a member of the New Mexican State Police. In 2005, a series of emails were sent to Victor Martinez, who ran a UFO discussion group. In the emails, it said Project Serpo was real. The project is one of 20 top secret projects that were being supervised by the Majestic 12. I have some difficulty, as in a lot, when believing anything that Doty says because he worked for the government telling lies and spreading disinformation. Why should we believe anything he says now? Maybe I'm wrong, but that is how I feel about the guy. Plus, if his information is true, it would still be classified. Those in power would take steps to silence him. I'm in a bit of a muddle. I'm fairly certain that Serpo is a real thing, yet I doubt one of the main witnesses. Gary McKinnon was accused of the biggest military hack of all times by U.S. prosecutors. He was facing 60 years in an American prison after Home Secretary John Reed agreed to have McKinnon extradited. I don't see how this could possibly be legal. McKinnon committed his crimes while in London. He never entered the United States, so any crimes committed here while there are not constitutionally valid. It's like all those scam calls from India and Nigeria. The FBI doesn't go after them because the crime is being committed in a foreign country. Still, when it comes to keeping a lid on the whole aliens and UFO story, the government will go to any lengths. Yes, that is my cat. I think she's been getting into the catnip again. McKinnon was accused of repeatedly hacking into dozens of computers used by the Pentagon, NASA, the U.S. Army, the Navy, the Air Force between February 2001 and March of 2002. The funny thing is, he was using a cheap computer with a dial up modem, with which he allegedly caused $500,000 worth of damage. They say he took down an entire military facility in Washington, which I certainly hope isn't possible. Was our military and NASA that cheaply put together? Come to think of it, the lowest bidder got every contract. All that extra government waste was of money handed out as gifts to grease the wheels and to make politicians wealthy. McKinnon admitted to breaking into the American computer system, but denies doing any damage. His actions were motivated simply out of curiosity, he says, and none of the computers he hacked into were password protected or encrypted. The security was so low, he said, that he could give you a A4 sheet to tell you exactly how to do it. An A4 sheet is simply a standard 8 by 11 piece of paper. Yikes. Yes, she's definitely beginning into the catnip. McKinnon said that as he was perusing the computers at NASA and the Pentagon, he noticed that other people were also in the system looking around. He thought that maybe they were from China or Turkey, Holland, maybe even Germany. Apparently, our computers were all put together by the lowest of the lowest bidders. In 2000, he started hacking the U.S. government and military because he believed they had evidence of the existence of UFOs. He's accused, accessed computers by running what's called a port scanner. A television has channels, a computer has ports. The web is port 80. Your email is port 110 for collecting and port 25 for sending. The port for logging on to Windows machines is 139. Doing a scan where you're looking for one port is really fast. He said he could scan 65,000 machines in under 9 minutes. This is all what McKinnon said. Once he was accessing a computer, it became harder as he wormed his way from one port of the network to another, eventually gaining control of the whole network and then being able to search for files. He kept track of his findings, the sort of things that would be considered proof for those of us that believe in UFOs, but would fail to persuade any skeptics. Everything fails to persuade skeptics. They worship at the altar of science, and woe to anyone who displeases their God. They'll send in the fact checkers. McKinnon found a spreadsheet headed Non Terrestrial Officers with lists of transfers of vehicles not registered to the U.S. military. Also, something he says was called the Disclosure Project, which included 400 testimonials of UFO sightings and photos which he speculated had been airbrushed to remove evidence of alien spacecraft. During one of his visits, he got the time zone wrong and he hacked onto a computer while somebody was still in the office. McKinnon was manipulating the cursor on somebody's desktop when he was discovered. Security specialists were called in, and the trail led back to England. McKinnon was taken to Holloway Police Station where he was interviewed, and he admitted to having accessed U.S. military computers. He was not charged, but in November 2002, he was indicted by the U.S. government. Since then, all charges have been dropped. In 2020, the Pentagon released 3 videos of high speed, incredibly maneuverable UFOs recorded by U.S. Navy pilots from 2015 to 2016. Former Pentagon employee David Grush testified before Congress that the U.S. government possessed unidentified, crashed extraterrestrial craft and non human bodies that had been retrieved at UFOs sites for decades. After Grush and 2 others testified under oath before Congress, there were UFOs and alien bodies at U.S. facilities. The Air Force came out and said, nah, we don't have anything like that. What I'm wondering is, what have they taken videos of since 2016? I'm sure there's got to be at least 1 or 2 more UFO videos out there, but like I said, once the government classifies something, it's impossible to get it unclassified. It was only through actually kind of a mistake on somebody's part that those videos were released from 2015 and 16. Back when all of this was getting started, a lot of folks said there were no alien life forms and they sure the heck weren't here. They fell back on the old it's too far to get here from there, the closest inhabitable star system, and so therefore there are no aliens on Earth. They would show cartoons of UFOs zipping back and forth like commuters going to work. The boys in the white lab coats all swore that aliens didn't exist because they had never met one. A couple of Harvard scientists have come out with a paper in which they say aliens just might already be here, living amongst us. The research was authored by 2 academicians. Is that even a word? Academicians? Yeah, those guys. Boys in white lab coats at the Harvard University's Human Flourishing Project. A guy named Tim Lomas and Brendan Case. The paper focused on four main theories about aliens living amongst humans. And now for the really, really hard to pronounce scientific names. These include human cryptoterrestrials, a theropod or hominid cryptoterrestrials, extraterrestrials, former extraterrestrial cryptoterrestrials, and magical cryptoterrestrials. Did they have to come up with such unpronounceable names? The human cryptoterrestrial theory suggests that highly advanced ancient human civilization may have continued to exist even after some catastrophic events like floods. The theropod theory proposes that there is a possibility of non human society evolving from terrestrial creatures like intelligent dinosaurs or ape like humanoids, no hominids, and now living beneath the surface of the Earth. The extraterrestrial theory is based on the belief that aliens might have traveled from the moon or other places to visit the Earth and then hidden themselves away and are still here today. The fourth theory deals with folklore creatures like fairies and elves, suggesting a magical connection to humans. However, this is the oddest theory of the four and is often opposed by those who don't believe in UFOs and they think that these explanations are hokey. Boys in the white lab coats are now divided between accepting their brethren's theories or standing fast alongside the old fogies who still hold some control over the truth and how far it will go. When I was a young'un, there was no greater authority on space other than Captain James T. Kirk. Captain Kirk himself is setting out to find the answers to the burning question of whether there are aliens here among us in his new TV show called Aliens Among Us. Of course, this is a streaming network which I'll probably never subscribe to. I'll wait for it to be released on YouTube for free. I'm not cheap, I'm frugal. William Shatner says, I'm not going to try to impersonate the captain. Yes, I am. He said, I spent decades pretending to explore space, and then I got a chance to go there. William Shatner said as he was previewing his new show. I want to know, is anybody out there? We asked pilots, space psychologists, and government officials the big question. Are there aliens among us? Shatner's new show challenges skepticism about UFOs, incorporates bombshell testimony, and looks at interesting studies that all make the case for the existence of something sentient beyond the world that we know. We don't say, look here, a piece of a spaceship, he said during a special appearance on Fox and Friends. Okay, enough of me not impersonating Shatner. It might not be how he speaks, but it's how I hear him speak. There are rumors that the American government has reverse engineered crashed saucers. They've found debris that they believe, no, that they know came from distant planets. For the folks asking why a UFO never lands on the White House lawn, what would that accomplish? Mess up the grass and give the Secret Service a heart attack. You know they've all seen Independence Day. I believe the aliens have already made contact with those in power, and the White House isn't where it's at. Recently, airline pilots reported UFOs dancing in the sky during a flight from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia to Abuja, Nigeria, and they captured footage of three shining dots in the sky. Van Pengbenan, who was responsible for capturing the footage, said that he saw as many as four dots, each aligned in a way reminiscent of the Phoenix lights, a phenomenon that happened back in Arizona 27 years ago. UFO mysteries have even captured Americans at the federal level, prompting lawmakers to launch historic congressional hearings on sightings, which there haven't been any in a while. I wonder why. It seems no matter what the folks in Washington ask, the military just says they have no UFOs, aliens, alien technology, or bodies. The deep state military, the ones who believe they are allowed to control all the information about anything they want, will never admit they've been lying because the ramifications will be biblical. As soon as one of these longtime military officers says, "Oh, yeah, Roswell, Cape Girardeau, that UFO that crashed south of Laredo, yeah, that's all true." Well, people are going to start suing for the technology, seeing as we, the people, supposedly own it. You know, us taxpayers. All that alien tech being secreted away in underground bases and used for their personal advancement would have to be available to us. Flying cars, here we come. Area 51 would become a theme park. Plus, the oil and gas industry would be kaputski in a matter of weeks. No need for an internal combustion car if all you need is some unobtainium and a tinfoil ship. The peoples whose empires are built on oil would have to find work, maybe in the food industry. Some people picture aliens coming to Earth so that everybody can gather around and sing Kumbaya and live happily ever after. I don't think so. Why do aliens choose to kidnap people in the middle of the night and do weird things that make parts of their bodies hurt? Why do they scare the heck out of folks doing bizarre things that they shouldn't be allowed to do? Here in the United States, we have laws against doing the things these aliens are doing, but they just keep doing them anyway. If the aliens are our space brothers, they sure have a weird way of showing it. I get the impression that aliens are more in league with the elites who want to rule our world and are willing to sign on with any invaders as long as they are higher on the food chain than the rest of us. The ones with the knowledge are the ones with the power, whether we elected them or not. Mark Twain once said, "If voting made a difference, they would never let us do it." Really, it's for our own good. We can't handle the truth. We're just too fragile to be shown alien technology without becoming hysterical. The folks in charge like to roll out the old War of the Worlds radio broadcast and say, "See, people will go nuts. We must protect them from their own nightmares." October 30th, 1938, Orson Welles and the Columbia Broadcast Theater performed an adoption of the book. Before the show, it was announced it was just theater. It sounded like a real newscast. Only the people who missed the first part thought it was real. Of those, only a few actually went nuts. No rioting in the streets, No people shooting each other. That was all Hollywood, probably with the blessings of the government, to make us citizens look like a bunch of simpletons. The people who will freak out are the ones eating Tide Pods and living in their parents' basements. Maybe a few religious fanatics might take a step out of their own minds. That won't be much of a change, so we might not even notice. Most people are a lot tougher than the elites are willing to admit. Now, how long would an alien being have to live here on Earth before no longer being an alien? If a spaceship landed on the floor of the ocean thousands of years ago, and the inhabitants, well, they made little aliens, how many years would need to pass before the beings are considered to be Earthlings? I'm asking for a friend. Oh, and will ICE have to go around and arrest space aliens if they run into any of them? That would be cool to watch. Hope you enjoyed tonight's show. If you did, spread it around. Let other people know what they're missing. If you're listening on YouTube or one of the smaller platforms, well, smaller, that's the wrong term for it. If you're listening to me on YouTube or one of the other platforms and you think maybe you'd like to hear all of the shows, you can find everything. How many is it? 542 shows now. You can find them all on iHeartRadio in the podcast section. Until next Saturday, I keep saying that. Somebody asked me why I keep saying until next Saturday, and it became a habit back when I used to do the show live and just can't get away from it. Until next time, this is Chris James for Strange Things.
Are you coming to the tree where there's strung up a man who they say he murdered 3? Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.